Thank you. Tim Andrews, testifying on behalf of Americans for Tax Reform. Thank you to the committee staff, and I also want to particularly thank Representative Dr. Foster for already a lot of the really good questions that she's been asking of some of the previous speakers, because this really gets down to a really important fundamental question. Do we support prohibition or do we support harm reduction? And what does the evidence show? Policies should be based on evidence and on sound science and not on anecdote and emotion. And the science we submit is overwhelmingly clear. Harm reduction works, prohibition doesn't. We see this from history of prohibition, but we see now, rather than prohibition, the evidence on harm reduction. The meta-analyses that have been conducted of hundreds of studies on vaping, first by by Public Health England, replicated by the Royal College of Physicians, show they are 95% safer than deadly combustible cigarettes. Georgetown University has modelled if a majority of American smokers took up vaping, up to 6.6 million lives would be saved in America over the next 10 years. The Cochrane Review, the gold standard of meta-analysis in medicine, has shown that these products are between 2 and 6 times more effective than any other smoking cessation tool. This is evidence, which is why the FDA speaks about the continuum of risk, which is why over 100 of the world's leading medical organizations, independent organizations, have endorsed harm reduction as a strategy. We know from the evidence that flavors are vital to helping adults quit smoking because they make reduced risk products more appealing. We also know from the evidence that they are unrelated to whether kids take these products up. Only about 12% of kids say this is a factor, and yes, that should be stopped. But what did we see these flavor bans do? On these products, we saw, according to Abigail Friedman's from Yale University study, they don't impact vaping rates. All they do is increase smoking rates amongst youth. This is evidence. What we see in Massachusetts happened, where they had a wholesale flavour ban, is the state lost $10 million in tax revenue a month, which was admittedly menthol cigarettes as well, $10 million in taxpayer revenue a month. Black market flourished, and guess what? Smoking rates didn't go down. In fact, they went up because the black market filled in the gap because you don't have the checks and balances you have in a retail market. And all of these, the links to this is provided in our submission, in our written testimony. What we have seen also in a week where once again the news is dominated by police interactions with the most vulnerable in our community, we have seen groups such as the ACLU, Reverend Al Sharpton, the families of George Floyd and Eric Garner come out against menthol bans because, again, they don't work, but they put people in a position where they can have an interaction with law enforcement, which can turn tragic. They also divert law enforcement attention away from other issues. So rather than break on prohibition and make this bill even worse, as some have suggested, by increasing prohibition, the committee should do everything in its power to accept science and support harm reduction.